Hello from Kotor, Montenegro. I am Dawn Pick Benson, and I am talking about solo travel after 50. So, true to what happens when you're traveling, there's literally a guy down here who decided to chainsaw just as I was starting to do my video. So hopefully it's not super loud, but that's what happens when we travel. Um, I wanted to sit out here though because this way you can see a little bit of my view. I am in the city of Kotor in Montenegro, and it is absolutely gorgeous here. Um, and today, what I want to talk about is for all of those of you out there who feel like you're direction challenged, that you're not good with directions, and in some ways, maybe that even keeps you from traveling or makes you scared to travel because you think I'm not good with directions, people won't speak English, I'm going to get lost. Okay, all of us raise our hands if that's us, because that is definitely me. My mom actually makes jokes in which she says often, like, Dawn, I have no idea how you're a world traveler, how you ever actually get home because you're so bad with directions. And she's right. I absolutely am. So um, I'm also here for the fact that it's no longer an excuse for any of those of you out there who think you can't travel because you're not good with directions. Because if I can do it, I'm pretty sure that you can. So I'm just going to talk about a couple of my tips. Probably going to give you 3, 4, 5 tips that work for me. For those of you who are not direction challenged, who easily get around, who just seem to always know north, south, east, west, you might not even care about this video, and that's fine. You might think all of this is ridiculous, but that's okay because this video is not for you. It's for those of us who get stressed out over directions and don't just innately know when we walk out the door what direction we're heading. So, first of all, I want to say Google Maps is your friend. Um, Download your Google Maps before you travel overseas so that you have access to it, whether or not you're online. I will say, though, with a caveat, I always download my Google Maps, but I also will say that it doesn't always work well. So do not rely on it. For example, when I was talking about being in Portugal earlier on in an episode, and it was about travel and first days, I was trying to get around my local area the first day I was out. I had downloaded my maps, and I pretty much did nothing. So do download them because they often work. Sometimes they don't. And honestly, I have no idea why. So if you are a techie and you know a lot about that, maybe drop me a message and let me know if you know the reason why it doesn't always work or if I'm doing something wrong. But for me, it does not always work, and my friends have told me the same. So, but all that to be said is it often does. It's super helpful. So you want to download that map. It's also a good time for you to just kind of look at the map and get a lay of the land. Even though I'm not great with directions, it's good for me to have a picture of the map in my head so I kind of know, if there's a body of water, where that is, where I'm staying. All of that is actually really helpful for me. And with that said, the second thing I would say is get a local SIM card, because you cannot necessarily rely on your Google Maps always working. And if you don't have a data package, and yeah, you could pay for international data while you're gone. And if you want to do that and aren't worried about the cost, you could definitely do that. But the cheapest, and honestly, it's a super simple way to go about it, is to get a local SIM card. That way you always have data. Your Google Maps always work. So I get a SIM card everywhere I go for this reason, because I know that I'm shit with maps. And so it really stresses me out if my Google Maps doesn't work. And so I always just prioritize getting a SIM card. Now, there's a couple ways you can do that. You can definitely go, and this gets into a lot of technology, and I'm going to do maybe a tech episode later, so I'm not going to go dive deep, but if you have specific questions, also let me know in the comments, and I can address those in another video. But if you want to get a local SIM card, it basically gives you access to data in a foreign country, so that you don't get extra charges from your phone in the US. It allows you to use data from whatever the local, internet or local phone company, cell phone company is in the area in which you're traveling. It's often not expensive at all. It can be anywhere from, I don't know, 5, 10, 15, 25 bucks. It sort of just depends. Are you staying a week or a month? I bought a SIM card in Portugal. It cost me 20 euros, but it was good for a month. And it had a lot of data because I knew I might be doing video calls. And so I bought a little bit of a bigger package. But you literally can go into a cell phone store. Often there are kiosks right in the airport, and you just walk up and you say, I need a SIM card. And they're super helpful. The person who's working there often will take your phone apart for you. They'll put it in for you. They'll explain it to you. They'll set it up for you. So that's the easiest way if you don't like doing tech stuff yourself. Go to a kiosk or a store and ask them to do it for you. I don't mind technology, but I also like to know that what I'm setting up is correct. And so I often opt for that. Now, the one thing you need to keep in mind that could get into the technology is if your US SIM card is not an eSIM and you actually have a SIM card like from T-Mobile or whatever, you have to pull it out and put a new SIM card in. Actually, this might get a little more complicated than I need to because everyone's phone is different. But just be aware that if you just have one slot in your phone, that you'll have to take out your current SIM card and put in a new one. I actually have an eSIM through T-Mobile that I set up before I left so that I don't have to do that and I can just stick in the international SIM card. Hopefully that's not all gobbledygook for you. The other option you can do if you don't do an actual SIM card that a lot of people are liking to do right now is that you can actually buy an eSIM through, there's an app called Airalo, AIRALO. You can use that app to find a local SIM card. You can search what country you're in, and you can often buy it for a day, a week, a month, and it's a really reasonable price. That does require you setting it up on your own. And I talked to a traveler the other day who found out that their phone actually can't accept eSIMs or that it doesn't work for them. And so that's something to also be aware of. Do a little bit of research, maybe talk to your phone company before you go so that you're aware of some of these things. Because you may or may not actually be able to use an eSIM. So you just kind of want to know which one might work for you. But anyway, all that to say, I will do a technology one later that's a little more detailed on that end. But the point of this here is that a SIM card is your friend because it allows you to ensure you have data, which means your Google Maps works, which means if you get lost, you can follow that little blue dot on Google Maps and find your way home, which I often have to do. So those are my first two. Download Google Maps, get a SIM card, looking at my notes. 3, this may or may not be for everyone, but this works for me, is I often take, especially the first time I go somewhere or if I'm staying somewhere in an Airbnb and I'm not sure exactly how to get back. This has happened to me before. I stayed in Macedonia in a small town called Ohrid, and the streets were windy and ancient, and I got part way away from the Airbnb and I thought, oh my God, I'm never gonna find my way back. There's twists and turns, and I didn't have a SIM card yet. I hadn't actually yet learned to do that quite so well. But anyway, so what I did and what I often still do is I take pictures along the way. When I needed to turn right, I took a picture. I remember there's a lot of Yugos there, so I remember taking a picture of a Yugo and knowing that at the Yugo I turned right. And then, once I turned right past the Yugo, then I took a picture of what that the wall looked like right there? Or was there a special sign? Was there like certain markers along the way so that you kind of have a picture of what is uh, like kind of leaving yourself breadcrumbs? And then so when you come home, you can kind of reverse engineer it. You can look at it and go, okay, all right, I passed that. I passed that. Because, sometimes you come by and you're like, oh, I think I turned left at the weird brick wall, but I'm actually not sure. Um, and so this has kind of saved my bacon several times, actually. So this is not for everyone. Those of you who are good with directions might really laugh your ass off and think this is funny. Um, it was work for me. And I did confirm it with another friend who's direction challenged. She does exactly the same thing. So if that's your game, do that. My fourth thing is to just ask. Honestly, most people when you're traveling are super nice. So if you're confused about where you are, if you're not sure you're walking the right way, or you have no idea, find someone who looks like they have a friendly face. Sometimes maybe go into a shop. Usually, people who own shops, obviously are locals, and ask do they speak English, and if they do, then ask for directions or ask them which way to go. This generally works. There are some cultures where people will, this is a whole different cultural conversation, but there are some cultures where people will give you directions even if they don't really know where to go. Um, so be aware of that. That maybe is something to Google when, depending on what country you're going to. But if you're in most of Europe, um, in the Western world at least, most people um, don't just give you directions if they don't know. That's more, I found that more so in the Middle East and India. Um, so anyway, those are my top things, and I also just want to say that you are not alone. I actually ran into a couple of weeks ago when I was still in Portugal. I ran into a girl from Australia, and we had this exact same conversation. We were both traveling solo, and we talked about how stressful it is when you're not used to, especially if you're not used to public transportation, it can really throw you off because you're not sure which bus to get on or which metro, and it's super confusing. And we had this really great conversation about it because, much like in the US and Australia, people drive cars for the most part. So we're not, unless you live in the US in New York City or something, but most cities in the US, we rely on cars. And so we are not as used to metros, as used to buses, reading timetables, understanding all of that. It's really scary. And so I also wanted to just affirm that if that scares you, um, you're not alone. We had this whole conversation about it. She was like, no kidding. When I get into a country, I have a little bit of a freak out of like exactly how do I get where. I'm not natural with directions. I was like, oh my God, so am I. And so we laughed about it over a glass of wine and had this really great conversation. But we also just wished that more women who wanted to solo travel knew this, because we said that we think a lot of people, a lot of our friends don't travel because this piece scares them of like, how do I get around? Especially in a place where people don't speak English. As an American, or an Aussie, like how do we get around? And how scary is that going to be or not be? And as we were talking about it, we just wish that more people just knew that we normalized it. That yeah, it is kind of scary, but we also can step into that scary space. And we both like magically found our way from the airport to the Airbnb. We um, got ourselves a glass. We met, got ourselves a glass of wine, had this great conversation. So obviously, we made our way and figured it out. And you do figure it out. It doesn't mean that it's not a little scary along the way, but you do make your way when these things happen. So yeah, we were just talking about how we wish, more women just knew that. They didn't let it because it's scary stop them. That maybe they just knew that there were some tools about, understanding the technology a little bit better and making sure you come so that you know that you have a plan for your phone to work. Because those unknowns, stripping away some of those unknowns really makes the whole thing so much easier. A lot of those unknowns are what keep us from going somewhere, right? So stripping away some of those unknowns, unpacking it, making sure, downloading your maps, doing a little research on SIM cards, understanding how those work, and being willing to ask someone to help you get one when you get into the airport, and then your little tricks about taking photos or doing whatever works for you, right? So anyway, those are my tips for sharing for those of us who are direction challenged. Hopefully that's helpful. And if you're direction challenged and you're a traveler, or you whether you travel overseas or locally, if you have your own tips that I didn't include, because actually I would love to hear if you have new tips, because maybe there's something that I haven't done yet that would be super helpful to me. So I'd love to hear your tips. So please drop those in the comments. Always also feel free to email me directly. I'd love to have a conversation. So hopefully that was helpful. And cheers from Montenegro.